Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Here Come the Sun, a weekly Connecticut Sun podcast. I'm your host, Sean Gauthier, and I'm recording on Sunday, June 30th. On today's show, we'll be breaking down the overtime win against the Mystics, the loss at home to the Dream, and talking to Noa Dalzell of the Next and Swish appeal about Veronica Burton. But before we get started, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. It'll also help other Sun fans find the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, let's get started with that overtime win against the Mystics. Obviously, the Sun had what was, at least on paper, an easier game since the Mystics were missing so many of their stars for this game. But man, did the Mystics come to play. The Mystics were locked in. I mean, Maisha Hines-Allen was 8 for 8 in this game, and she's also 3 of 3 from the free throw line with 7 rebounds. Stephanie Dolson came up big, shooting 4 of 7 from 3 and with 2 blocks in the game. Jade Melbourne came in with 4 of 5 shooting, 2 of 2 from the three-point line. I mean, you can go down the list, and they were having big performances from all of their games despite those missing stars. That said, the Sun offense really came to play. I mean, Dyalla Bonner was 10 of 22 with 2 made three-pointers. 3 Janae Carrington came back with shooting 4 of 9 from 3. She had 22 points in the night overall. Ty Harris was also 9 of 14 with 23 points in that game. We also saw a breakout performance from Veronica Burton in that game, which obviously I will get into more with Noa Dalzell when we talk to her in the interview we have later. But also, Dyalla Bonner hit some really clutch threes in that game, including that crazy logo shot she had. And I was tweeting about it with Steve Alexander on Twitter, who mentioned that the team's PR team, and I think also that the media in general that covers the league, need to be making a bigger deal about how Dyalla Bonner's been playing. Steve said on Twitter, he's quoted, "She prevented this game from being a huge, embarrassing blowout," and that's absolutely true. I also think that Ty Harris and Janae Carrington really kept us in this game. And Carrington, especially in that overtime period, was phenomenal and sealed the deal in that game. Ultimately, it wasn't the prettiest game by any means, but look, all the wins count the same in this league, so, we're going to take the win and keep it moving. But let's transition over to the loss against Atlanta. I saw so many Sun fans online saying variations of, this was basically a scheduled loss, but it being so close made it hard. It was a back-to-back overnight travel. I heard the team didn't get into Connecticut until like 3 a.m. because of some traffic in DC. And so I feel like everything was set up to be a loss, but the Sun offense was still here, I mean, I was particularly impressed, Rachel Banham. She's had minimal minutes with this team so far, but she was 1 of 3, technically 1 of 2 on the night because she had a last second heave. But I really love watching the way that this team has been putting up threes, especially in this game. And we know this team can shoot threes, and so it's going to be important that obviously we start hitting some of those. But as a process standpoint, it's good to see the team getting those shots back up. When I'm thinking about takeaways from these games, the biggest thing that I saw was actually miscommunication on the defensive end, especially in defending the pick and roll, which defense is this team's strong suit. And so, I think that falling off is really what has been leading to some of these poor performances over the course of this losing skid that the Sun are on right now. One thing I noticed in particular on the pick and roll, it seemed like on a lot of possessions, there was some miscommunication about how they were going to be dealing with it, whether they were switching or playing drop. And, I don't know what the game plan is supposed to be now, right? But in previous years, especially when we had Natisha Heidemann running the point, there was a lot less switching in those pick and rolls, and guards were fighting over screens and avoiding the switch that leads to those big mismatches in the paint. But in these last games, I've seen a lot of moments where the guards are then staying with the big on offense and leaving Brianna Jones or Alyssa Thomas to have to make the decision whether to play drop or switch. In a lot of these possessions, they're dropping with the big as well, and then you're getting a wide open shot for a guard at the 3. And that's really killing the Sun because their 3 has not been falling in the same way. I think one thing to think about and one thing to keep in mind in terms of that is that there are a lot of new players on this team. Obviously, that the core of this team is still together, but around them, you're seeing a lot of new pieces. And I know that Tarika on the broadcast was talking about this a bunch. And, I think that despite the early massive success at the beginning of this season, there are some growing pains that are normal. And I don't know if, matchups were the reason why the team was doing so well on defense at the beginning of the season. But I think that these are normal growing pains and that we'll see some more clear communication on the defensive end that will really help continuing to keep the score low for the offense of the opposing team and helping the Sun also break out, because so much of the Suns' offense comes from defense. Especially we've seen Dejounte Carrington playing in transition, and so if the defense can get back locked in that way, I think it's really going to help the Sun on the offensive end as well. Another tough thing that we've seen over these past two games is a lack of production from Alyssa Thomas, at least to her own standard. We're so used to her being on triple-double watch every time she steps foot on the court, and we haven't really seen that in these past few games. It does make me wonder, about the ankle injury that we've seen. She's not on the injury report for Monday night's game against the Mercury. And so here's hoping that the ankle injury has cleared up, she's feeling better, and we will go right back to the usual triple-double watch from the start of the game that we have for Alyssa Thomas. Some good things to take away from these games, though. I mean, there were things that I thought were huge in terms of the process and in terms of what's going to lead this team to be a title contender again this season. And one of those was that Dejounte Carrington is back. Dejounte has been shaking that early shooting slump. She's hitting threes. Over the past two games, she went a combined 7 of 15. And those threes also really help open up her drive to the basket. There were so many times where I saw her attacking a closeout, up faking. And, if you add that on top of her scoring in transition, she's becoming a major offensive threat for this team. And it's really exciting to see Dejounte really stepping into that role this season. The other thing is that although Ty Harris hasn't been shooting the best from three, especially, by her own standard, that mid-range jumper game is opening up the offense for the Sun. She's driving in, stopping on a dime, and hitting these big jumpers right in front of defenders who are still flailing towards the basket, thinking she's driving all the way in for a layup. And it does make her that much harder to guard because you don't know what she's going to do. And also, I just think that she sees a few of those fall early in a game. It's going to help those threes start falling, because we know elite shooters like her just need to see a few of them go in before the rest of them start falling in too. Other thing is, I want to see Rachel Banham shooting a little bit more. She's playing limited minutes, especially over these last couple of games, but her three ball is just so clean. And so, it helps space the floor. Obviously, she had that last minute heave in the game against the Dream that truly almost went in, although it wouldn't have won the game anyway. But her shot making ability is something that I think is going to be crucial for the Sun team. And I want to see, more of her getting the ball in open spaces, to be able to take those threes and hit those threes that will also help keep the Sun in the game, or, build upon a lead, especially as the Sun are getting into the rotation. And speaking of the rotation, Veronica Burton. I mean, limited shot attempts in these past two games, but scoring efficiently, had a big three against the Mystics. They left her wide open at the top of the key, and she made them pay for it. And, if she can consistently provide on the offense in those moments when she's on the court, and especially keeping up the defense that she's so well known for, she's going to be such an important part of this rotation as well, and will prove to have been a great midseason pickup by the Sun after she was waived earlier. And speaking of Veronica Burton, this is a good way to transition over to the fact that I got a chance to talk with Noa Dalzell of The Next and Swish Appeal earlier today. She recently wrote a piece for The Next about Burton's defense, her fit with the Sun, and her impact on winning. I've linked to that piece in the show notes, and here is my interview with Noa Dalzell. So I'm so excited to have on the show. If you are a Celtics fan on Twitter, you absolutely know her. She's a must follow. I'm so excited to have on the show Noa Dalzell. Noa, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to be here to talk about the Sun.
Thank you. So I recently read your story in The Next about Veronica Burton, and it was after the high of that overtime win, all the energy, and I was just like, I need more and more Sun content, and I saw your story. And so, I personally didn't know a ton about Veronica since she came over mid-season, and, she had such a great game. I just wanted to know, what did you see in that game?
Yeah, what was funny was that I was writing that story the day before that game, and she hadn't really played. And so I was just thinking, she's a new player on the team. One of the things about the WNBA that I think is a little bit tough to follow is that there's players getting waived and signing, and there's a lot of movement, roster movement. Um, and she's actually someone that's from the town over for me. So I remember when I was playing high school basketball, I remember her name and everybody talking about how good she was. She was not in my league, but she was literally like a 5 minute drive from my high school. So
Wait, that's
I
so
followed her
cool.
career. Yeah, yeah. When I interviewed her, I was like, you don't remember me because there was no reason to remember my name, but I remember your name from AAU and from kind of just playing in the same divisions and everything. But yeah, so I followed her career for a while. She had a great collegiate career at Northwestern. She's kind of like a all around solid player. She can shoot. She's a good facilitator. She's a really good defender. Like that's what she's been known for in college. She won all sorts of defensive accolades, and then spent 2 years with the Wings. And it's one of those things where she was a pretty high draft pick. I think she was drafted seventh, and so those kinds of players you would expect would have an easy ride at least for the first few years of their career. But it's really difficult to make it in the WNBA. With only 12 teams and limited spots and vets that are playing longer and longer. And so I was pretty surprised when she got waived a couple weeks ago. But she's in that category of players that you see get waived and you just know someone's going to pick them up. And obviously that's what happened. And for so many reasons, I think she's a great fit for Connecticut. And I think she's going to be really important to what they're able to do this season.
Yeah, I think you're right too, especially talking about that defense. I feel like I've seen some Sun fans, in the time since we're in the middle of a bit of a losing skid. I've seen some Sun fans talking about the lack of height and the lack of shooting on this current squad. But I feel like one thing that was so successful for them in their early run and that like amazing start they had was the way that the defense was feeding the offense and leading to it. And so, yeah, you're right that having a Big Ten defensive player of the year is a great fit on this squad. And it seems like, again, based on your story, it seems like she's like having a good fit with the team. I know that you talked to the coach and a couple of pplayers about that. What did you see there?
Yeah, so she played with Ty Harris and Mariah Jefferson in Dallas. And so that always helps that she's only in her third year in the league and already she has two former teammates that are on this roster. And from everything that I've gathered from just being around Connecticut this season and talking to players, talking to the coaches, this is a group that really likes each other and they have a great time playing together. They're very close. And so I think from a cultural standpoint, it's a pretty easy group to assimilate into. And when I spoke with her last week, she pretty much said, or actually this week, she said, it's been a really seamless transition. It's been really easy to find herself and kind of acclimate to the role and acclimate to being, a backup point guard now, which is these last two games. I mean, she's playing pretty significant minutes. It seems like she's really settling into that. And Stephanie White, she said she's just the kind of player that, she makes it easy, right? She doesn't need to be told things multiple times. She's a quick learner. This Sun team, it's a veteran team. The core has played together for a couple of years now, DeWanna Bonner and Alyssa Thomas and Brianna Jones. And so I do think it's a little bit of a harder place to come in and fit right in if your the expectations are kind of perfection from the start. And obviously they've been struggling a little bit, but still a 14-4 team and a team that should be in the mix to win the championship. And so from everything that I've heard and seen, it seems like she's culturally assimilated really well. And then obviously she's a defensive minded player. And the Connecticut Sun, as you said, is a defensive-minded organization. They always have been, and they have, Dejanay Carrington, who's kind of at the head of the snake, Alyssa Thomas anchoring them. So they have the pieces and the personnel, and it almost seems to be a requirement to play in Connecticut is to be a defensive-minded player of some sort. And obviously the shooting's been difficult. I do a WNBA weekly newsletter, and I was just looking at the three-point stats. They're the worst three-point team in the league as far as makes per game, 5 3-pointers per game, right? So there's things that they need to work on, and she's not going to fix all their problems. She's just going to augment and kind of fill in that backup role, but I do think she fits right in.
Yeah, and I also just love having a player from New England on the team too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the Sun UConn crossover fandom is so real. I feel like I became a UConn fan because of being a Sun fan. But in terms of having like a real hometown hero on the team, it's always fun to root for someone from home. And I'm just like my brain is still so stuck on the fact that you played in the same spaces and are from so close to each other. That's so
She's
crazy.
the only person that is a professional basketball player, that I've had any sort of connection as far as like regional crossover or anything. Like I remember that name all the time, and you just think those people are not going to end up in the WNBA, let alone for the team that you cover. So it is pretty cool. And her family, she has a lot of media people in her family. Kayla Burton, her sister, I believe she covers a lot of sports, but she was doing sideline for one of the Celtics games as well. So there's a lot of crossover. It's a pretty cool to see, and she seems like I think she's gonna stay there. Honestly, I would not be surprised if she stays there a while.
That'd be great for me. Again, I love having a hometown person to root for.
Yeah.
I think slightly off topic of just talking about Veronica Burton, but wondering, you just finished up your first season covering the Celtics, and now you're in the midst of your first season covering the Sun. What's that been like for you? Have you been enjoying it? What's been, how's that been for you?
Yeah, it's been awesome. So anybody that has talked to me or has been on my Twitter or anything knows that this has been like the best thing ever, honestly, covering the Celtics. And I know you were at the games as well, and I can imagine that was an awesome experience for you as well. But just being able to be in the gym around the crowd, the atmosphere, the players, like forget the journalism. Like it was just so fun to be there and to be in that environment, especially growing up in Boston and loving TD Garden as I always have. And I thought the Celtics team was just so fun to cover. It's always fun to be around joy, and I think that it was a team that played with a lot of joy and obviously got along great. Like I can't imagine what it would be like to cover like a broken locker room. I'm sure one day I will, but it's a completely different experience to show up to practice. Everybody's mad. They're on a 9-game losing streak. It's just human nature to enjoy being around positivity, right? And I feel like every day we were there, I mean, there was a couple of losses and a couple of like letdown games, but even those I think were in the context of a very successful year and everybody kind of clicking, and so they were taken very lightly by the players and the team itself. Maybe the media didn't take it lightly, but I think the players did. And so I started covering the Sun in the middle of the Celtics season, when the WNBA season started, so I guess in the playoffs. And it was very challenging to juggle both, just because I do think the WNBA demands full-time attention the same way that the Celtics does, and so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of regret that I had to do that, and I don't know why. I mean, I guess I should have expected the Celtics will make the finals, but I didn't anticipate that there would be like a 3-month overlap the way that there was. Like I feel like I didn't do the math on it right, but it's been awesome covering Connecticut as well, and it's a completely different experience as far as there's only a handful of reporters that cover the team. There's way more access. You want to talk to a player, you can get that interview that day. For the Celtics, it's like you have to jump through hoops and figure out and beg and plead, and and you might still not get them probably at the end of the day. So from an access standpoint and just from how little media there is, it's way easier to cover Connecticut, but it's also harder because I can't turn on the post-game show and watch the analysis of the Connecticut Sun game to get other people's perspectives and opinions the way that I do for Celtics, where there's like 100 podcasts that I can tune into. So it's a very different experience, and I think over the next few years, we're going to see way more media and way more coverage of the WNBA teams. And so I'm really excited about this podcast because, there's not a lot of team-specific pods for the W, and I think it deserves that attention.
No, thank you so much for joining for this first ever episode of Here Come the Sun. I'm so excited to have met you, and I know that we had talked about this, and so I'm so excited to have you on the show today and to continue reading all of your work. Noa covers the Connecticut Sun for The Next Hoops and also for Swish Appeals. And if you're a Celtics fan like I am, you can also catch her work on Celtics blog and at CLNS Media. Noa, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was my interview with Noa Dalzell. If you want to read that story about Veronica Burton that we talked about, I've linked to that in the show notes. And I've also linked to the WNBA wraparound that Noa mentioned in the interview as well. So you can read that on Fansided every week. All right, Sun fans, before we go, a few housekeeping notes. First of all, I want to make sure everyone here is voting for their favorite Sun player to go to the All-Star game. I've been voting. And if you also saw Caitlin O'Kane's piece for CBS, covering, the relationship between AT and DB, you're also dreaming of that matchup at the All-Star game. In that piece, Dewana Bonner was talking about the chance that she and Alyssa Thomas would get to play against each other, with Alyssa Thomas representing Team USA. And DB said, I'm just going to shoot it and hope it goes in, because once it goes in, I'm never going to stop talking trash. And I personally want to see all the content that comes with that. So make sure you're voting for all of your favorite Sun players to make it to the All-Star game. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to this show wherever you get podcasts. We are now also on YouTube, although it's not a video so much as just kind of the audio on YouTube. But still, if that's where you listen to shows and that's where you watch things, you can catch us on YouTube as well. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review to help other Sun fans find the show. Lastly, I want to hear from you. So make sure that you're replying or DMing us on social media at CTSunPod. You can email us at ctsunpod@gmail.com, or you can leave us a voicemail so you can hear your voice on the show. You can call us at 617-903-7683. Thank you so much to the folks who've already been responding to us on Twitter, and I can't wait to be more in conversation with all of my fellow Sun fans. So that's all for this very first episode. Thanks again to Noa Dalzell for joining the show for our very first episode, and I'll talk to you all next week here on Here Come the Sun.